One of my favourite things about rally games is that most of the stages can be driven in reverse. Not like that. I mean that you can start at the other end of the stage and drive in the opposite direction. Obviously, this is a no-brainer method to double the amount of roads that players can race on. But I think it has the added benefit of being genuinely very interesting. I really love tackling a very distinctive corner in one direction and then recognising it later on when I'm doing the reverse stage. It's fun to see just how different it can be to drive from another angle. This got me wondering, why don't circuit racing games do the same thing? Well, some of them do. A good chunk of Gran Turismo's fantasy tracks have reverse layouts. Wreckfest also has them as well. And if we want to talk about real-life examples, some well-known tracks used to be ran in the opposite direction of their modern incarnations, such as Albert Park in Australia, Brands Hatch in the UK, and Hockenheim in Germany. And there's even some racetracks that are driven in both directions in the modern day, such as Knock Hill in Scotland, but these are the exception. The vast majority of real racetracks are a British boy band for safety and economic reasons. Chain Bear made a great video explaining in depth why this is the case for Silverstone. But this is sim racing, we don't need safety, so why not drive reverse layouts? I decided to find out. I tested 40 tracks by driving them in the wrong direction, and while there were a lot of middling results, I stumbled across some surprisingly good and some shockingly bad driving experiences. For my testing, I drove the Porsche 911 Cup, since it's a medium-speed race car that won't be too out of place on most tracks, and the footage seen will be a mixture of iRenting and Assetto Corsa. So, allow me to present my most loved and hated sim racing circuits to drive backwards. I'm sure those of you with a brainstem would suspect that driving a carefully and deliberately designed racing circuit backwards might be a daft idea. So just to confirm your worldview, I'm starting off with the worst tracks, and Long Beach is a great example. Street circuits tend to be visually busier and more ambiguous, and driving Long Beach backwards is genuinely visually confusing in parts. For instance, the approach for T6 here. Am I going left? Right? Who knows? The hairpin, which I would charitably describe as full-blown AIDS, is now approached at a very high speed at the end of the straight, which makes it very unforgiving, particularly with no clear braking markers. And T5 here with its curbing is super awkward when driven backwards. This track is pretty terrible in reverse. I give it 2 poorly advised Source Award speeches out of 10. This is a circuit that is ordinarily going to be a bit divisive anyway, because it's so hilly and technical, but in reverse it is so much worse. Turn 14 and 15 are comically ridiculous when approached in reverse. It's now a very steep downhill drop that leads directly into a sharp right-hand corner, and you get to approach it blind with no braking markers at the end of a straight. It's insane, and it's impossible to take it with any sort of confidence. The rest of the circuit doesn't suffer much from approach speed issues, but from extended periods of blindness due to the hills and crests. This is a natural feature of the circuit anyway, but the corners have been designed to accommodate that in one direction, and it just doesn't drive well the other way. This is not enjoyable at all. I give it 2 Tour de France pile-ups out of 10. This is an all-time favourite circuit of mine, so it pains me to say this, but it's a bit rubbish in reverse. For starters, the approach to turn 10 is really bad, because you're carrying a fair bit of speed into this large crest. The issue is that you've got to start slowing down to make the turn well before you can see it, with no markers, and because of the crest you lose a ton of traction which feels sketchy as hell when you're trying to slow down. Turn 5 suffers from a similar blind braking zone over a crest as well, and the S's that follow are much less enjoyable to drive because you're going way slower. Turn 4 is a bit crap because of this alternate layout road which is visually confusing, and even the Turn 1 exit has me almost wanting to go through the old pit lane, since you end up facing right at it. Maybe it's because I like this track so much normally, but this one really rustled my jimmies. I give it 2 Diet Cokes out of 10. This one really doesn't translate well to a reverse layout. This chicane here, for instance, it feels very strange to take in reverse because of how deceptively it tightens for the exit, so it's really easy to overcook the entrance and miss the turn.
I'm Batman.
The worst part by far though is the approach to turn 8. Normally you're taking this corner quite slowly, but in reverse you're being spat out of a high-speed bank turn right into it, which makes that wall there a complete death trap if you're late on the braking. If T1 is known as heartburn turn, for this reverse layout maybe they could call T8 brain trauma bend. And to top it all off, T2 is pretty visually confusing to approach in reverse as well. Yeah, this isn't good. I give the Charlotte Roval 1.5 failed Wright Brothers test flights out of 10. Perhaps the most iconic circuit in the world, and I think maybe that's why it felt so wrong to drive backwards. But there are parts that genuinely just don't work. A few choice examples. What is ordinarily the exit of the carousel just clearly isn't designed to be used as an entrance. It's hard to see and it's angled very awkwardly. Approaching Exmuller from the wrong direction is a bit of a death trap as you end up carrying a lot of speed and you can't see the corner over the crest, so you've got to granny it into the entrance or risk committing Sudoku right into the wall. And the downhill section after Arenberg, it's one of my favourite parts of the whole circuit. It's just so fast and it has a great flow, which is totally ruined when you're trudging uphill in the reverse direction. There's too many corners to go over here, so you'll either have to take my word for it or try it yourself, but you've been warned, it sucks. Nords is a notoriously difficult circuit, which is normally part of the appeal, but its pure length and trickery in reverse made the idea of trying to learn it such a torturous prospect that I just gave up. I genuinely hated this. I give the Nordschleife 1 deflated blow-up doll out of 10. Fortunately, it's not all bad. Donington is one that works quite well in reverse, and I think it's due in no small part to its very open and flowing track design. For the most part, you don't have to worry about ploughing into a very close wall if you have an off-track, and the visibility and readability of the track remains quite good on the whole. If anything, T8 is noticeably less scary when approached in reverse, and I think the flow of turns 3 through 7 is retained quite well. One of the trickiest parts of the whole circuit is the approach to T12 at the start, as there's just enough of a crest along with the road from the national layout to make it visually deceptive, but you can make out the inside curbing early enough for you to brake comfortably in time. This one is good. I give it 8 industrial revolutions out of 10. Zolder is a bit of a Vegemite track, but it turns out that I love it both ways. When you're approaching turn 11, there is a small crest that makes it a blind approach, but it does give you visibility back just in time, and in the Cup car you can use that crest as a braking marker, which I found really fun. Turn 10 also feels a bit more interesting at high speed, which makes the setup for turn 9 slightly more challenging in a good way. I like the way that turn 8 slows you down for the entrance of the turn 7 chicane, and I think blasting over the small hill before the turn 5 chicane at such high speed is pretty fun. I'm not a huge fan of the way that turn 3 leads into turn 2. I think it works a lot better in the normal configuration, but it's not a disaster or anything. And turn 1 is a great bravery and commitment test to see how close you can get to the wall when powering through the exit. This one is really enjoyable. If you don't normally like Zolder anyway, it's probably not going to win you over. But if you already like it, definitely try this out. I give Zolder 8.5 Angry John Cleeses out of 10.
Belgians, my God, have we got it in for them, a greedy pseudo-French bastard!
What really struck me about Road America is how directly the reverse layout translates from the normal layout, as for the most part you're not approaching corners at dramatically higher speeds than you would be normally. The main exception to that is turn 2. You'll be going very fast when you start braking for that one, but even then it's a straightforward corner and pretty easy to get to grips with. You could argue that this characteristic makes this pick one of the more boring reverse layouts, but I genuinely enjoyed how quickly and easily I got up and running with Road America. It feels like the appeal of the circuit remains intact while feeling fresh and different enough to be a fun novelty. Definitely worth trying, and is maybe one of the best places to start with your backwards journey. I give Road America 9 real cheese people out of 10. Of them all, this was the one that I think I had the most fun with, even if it probably would be a bit chaotic to race like this. What really won me over here is corners 6 through 10. Not only is this section great in the normal layout, but it's so much fun in reverse. Obviously the corkscrew is very famous, and it's pretty spicy here because you can't really see where you're going. Normally you can use the trees to help aim the car through the corner, but in reverse there's not really a whole lot you can use as a reference, which makes it very difficult. You just have to take it easy and wait until you can see again before you get back on the power. But then you've got what is now a very fast downhill section, which is a blast. It's fun to find out just how brave you actually are here, since the wall is very close on the outside of turn 6. Other than that, the rest of the track isn't too dramatically different. The main difference is the double apex of turn 2 feels perhaps a bit less fun since you're approaching it much more slowly. But the trade-off is that you get a nice long run-up and a final downhill speed boost to the finish line, which will definitely make for some intense wheel-to-wheel photo finishes. Good stuff. I give Laguna Seca 9.25 Bobby Lees out of 10. While it isn't an absolute favourite of mine, I am an Oschersleben enjoyer, so I feel surprised to be saying this, but I might actually prefer this track in reverse. In the normal layout, there's two parts of the track that aren't my favourite. Turns 4, 5 and 6. There's a decent straight that leads into these corners, so you're going reasonably quick when you hit them, and it always feels like understeer city through there to me. Whereas in reverse, you've just come out of turn 7, so you're going way slower, and you spend more of your time accelerating through this section onto the straight, which just feels a lot better to me. The other section is turns 8, 9 and 10. Setting the car up correctly for turn 10 can be challenging and a bit annoying, but in reverse I really like sweeping through turn 10, trying to hold on to as much of my speed from the straight, and then smashing through 8 and 9. It just feels more fun somehow. The one corner that lets the circuit down a little bit is turn 2, as it tightens suddenly at the exit, which is a bit awkward and definitely works better in the normal layout. But as an upside, what is normally the pit exit here is one of the worst I can think of, as drivers who overshoot the turn 2 entry can collide with people who are leaving the pits. I think it works far better as a pit entrance, honestly. I love this reverse layout. It changes some corners in ways that I genuinely appreciated, so it's well worth a shot. I give Oschersleben 9.5 busty Bavarian beer maids out of 10. So between all of the good and bad tracks that I tried, I think there were some common observations shared between them. The old saying that you don't know what you've got till it's gone comes to mind, because the creature comforts of appropriate curbing and braking markers really does make driving a circuit a lot easier, and you really notice it when they're missing. And on the not so good in reverse tracks in particular, you definitely suffer from a lot of bad visibility issues and confusing readability problems, which don't enhance the driving experience at all. The other problem, which is particularly relevant if you are actually going to host a race, is that the pit entries and exits very commonly don't make any sense, so you'd probably want to keep it to a sprint race without any pitting going on. But all of those problems aside, I genuinely can't recommend this highly enough. I really enjoyed this. I think particularly for tracks that you're really familiar with, it's so much fun to tackle them backwards and see them in a whole other light, particularly if you stumble across one that you end up really enjoying. I'd really like to see iRacing do some reverse track races during week 13. Not sure if that's ever been done before, but it would be fun. Definitely give this a go if you haven't done it before. And if you have, let me know about your favourites or least favourites in the comments. Thanks for watching, be sure to like, subscribe and hit that bell, and consider sharing the video with someone who would dig it. If you'd like to join my new Discord server, the link is in the description. Until next time, always remember, this too shall pass.